Thank you. I wanted to open with this, as I said, with some energy to prove that this is a very much comprehensive approach to the title we have for the panel, the defense policies, but also the infrastructure, and to give you a summary of visual of what we do out there together with the allies and partners. And I'll make 2 or 3 points for the topic today, the first being the NATO defense policy, and that's obviously above me. My colleagues will probably address some of that too, but I want to fuel from that in pointing out that the last military committee meeting in Chad session, 10th of May, concluded with a joint statement from the chairman and the 2 strategic commanders. And one important and vital point for us was the integration of the new regional plans and the national plans. And what this means for us as a continuation of the defense policy, it's right at the time and the space we need today in the light of what's going on in Ukraine. This was critical when Romania and other allies participated with planners in determining what are the new regional plans and what is the new setting of command and control, the new force models, and the force structure allocated to the regional plans. And first of all, the word regional presents and capitalizes, yes, regions, but it's the community of allies and capabilities that come to every regional plan. So I don't want you to understand that a regional plan responds just to regional or geographic needs. And this is a first value, I think, added to from the concept of integration. The second one is, and this on behalf of the defense staff, we're working and we're in the process to determine what is the congruency of the concept between a regional plan and the national plan. And this is a discussion in the region. This is also a discussion inside the defense staff with the services and the other components. And I can tell you that initially it proved very difficult because you have so many new trends and new constants of or being determined in Ukraine that influence the planning. Planning, when I say planning, I also refer to how do you balance between the OPP, the NATO operational planning process, and the NATO defense planning process. So you consider plans, but you also consider how do you develop the capability targets for the future. One point that I would like to make is I think Romania, in terms of the military, made very smart investment in the C2 in relationship with the new regional plans. And I would like to point out that today, as we speak, the multinational Corps Southeast in Sibiu is about to reach full operational capability this year, the multinational Division Southeast, and also the multinational Brigade Southeast. So that there's a backbone, at least in the land domain, that is ready to grasp the concept of a regional plan and accommodate and integrate and be a bridge between the NATO plan and the National Defense Plan. Planners in the defense staff are, like I said, are present in this revision of the National Defense Plan. We're in the completion phase of issuing towards the Chief of Defense the last reviews of the National Defense Plan. And of course, in the light or post-Vilnius summit, we'll be ready to implement most of those. A part of this is also as I mentioned, the congruency between the plans. How do we capacitate? And I'll make the second point. Also, the topic addresses infrastructure investments. And one very valid requirement is, with so many contributions from the allies, and again, you have the Collective Defense Battle Group in Chinku, led by France, with Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And France is the framework nation and the lead nation. You have the Portuguese contingent, you have the Polish contingent, the North Macedonian contingent, the American contingent, and MK. And this, when you go back to capacity requirements, we do have some challenges in how do we distribute capacities for training and host nation support. So where do you put soldiers? Where do you allow soldiers to live, rest, and then to train? One example important for us is also, it looks tactical, but it's important for strategic benefits because different allies have different weapons, and in terms of providing the safety for training, the capacities for training need to accommodate for that. So a tank from X nation and an armored vehicle from another nation present in Romania, they need to have a safe environment to train, and this requires for the infrastructure to adapt. And I know, as to my previous job, that land forces we committed some of the budgets to redetermine capacities for training ranges, especially Chinku, Smrdan, and Babadog as being the backbone of the land forces in training provided not only for domestic forces but also for the allied forces. Another point in an infrastructure is how do you, in the light of the regional plans and the new force models, which require an increased readiness, how do you capacitate for logistics and resources of the contingents and capabilities present in Romania? Mainly, it's the POL and the ammunition. So if you bring a battalion, you need to make sure you have, let's say, 7 days of self-sustained concept of logistics. Well, where do you put it? And where do you invest this to be able to provide an increased readiness for that capability? And in this terms, I can tell you that, again, the C2 backbone that I described is very much involved with the Romanian logisticians to go out there and predetermine capacities to integrate logistics from different capabilities. Last but not least, the third point I would like to make, and it is inside this integration of regional plans and national plans, but I think it's an important constant that we all need to think of, the human resource. The human resource today, and many of the allies are looking for solutions because the dynamics of how do you select and recruit and especially retain human resource as a professional force for the armed forces, that's very important today. And I can tell you, especially in Romania, this becomes an important line of effort to make sure we attract future soldiers, NCOs, and officers with the right competencies. And an example to this is, if you see HIMARS today in one of the launchers, you really understand that you need a different type of a soldier to operate that. Yes, you do provide education and training, but he or she needs to come after the high school with a special set of digital competencies. It's a very high technology piece of equipment, and you need those competencies to be developed. One, two is retention. And retention, because you do have a competition for human resource from other professions. And you need to provide this career for long-term or mid-term and long-term for all categories, enlisted, NCOs, and officers. Last but not least, I would make the point about the special relationship in this concept of integration between regional plans and national plans, the special relationship you have with the partners in the region and in the Black Sea region, and pointedly Moldova, Ukraine, and then Georgia. And this allows for us to pull some of the capabilities of the partners and train here in Romania in very specific scenarios and determine the real and actual interoperability that you can actually allow yourself to develop with a partner, which sometimes, because of the standardization and because of some of the processes, they may look like limitations. But again, at the tactical and operational level, we do look for instance, the Moldovan army, how to consolidate the training partnership with the units from Moldova. I'll stop here a little bit, and I'm looking forward to the other contributions of the panelists and also the questions that you have for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General, for the comprehensive presentations. I retain the last part with the human resources. I also believe strongly that most of the countries in NATO have declared this problem. So it's a general problem which needs to be tackled carefully and on mid-long-term focus. Okay, with that, I will pass the floor to the next speaker, Mr. Phillip PETERSEN. He will have also a presentation, so I will ask my colleagues to help me with that. Phillip, the floor is yours.
I'm not exactly sure why I'm on this panel, other than George Guterres considers me a thermal grenade, so I should add some excitement. I'm going to stick to some text. I'm going to assume that my audience can read for themselves, and so I'm not going to read the slides as I might otherwise do, but just add a few comments. So, to start with, all militaries tend to want the shiny object, that is weapons platforms, but all too often neglect the requirements necessary to translate the purchased platforms into genuine deterrence. The Russian General Staff contrasts this conflict with two concepts: Ustrashenia, terrorizing, versus sdерживание, restraint. And they consider themselves restraining an opponent from taking particular actions by their equipment and their capabilities. And with regards to us, they consider that we're just terrorists. Be happy to take that analogy further if somebody's interested. Okay, second slide. What can I say? We're at war. Romania is a frontline state. And most important, please don't get overconfident about what's happened so far in Ukraine. NATO vulnerabilities are that it's too tied to main operating bases. It still has too much towed artillery. Everybody is still dealing with the tactical revolution in military affairs, and there continue to be too many vulnerabilities in NATO logistics. The Russian General Staff has a plan. It's called the aerospace operation to suppress NATO main operating bases and shift the correlation of forces. By their calculation, 50% of NATO's firepower is delivered by fixed-wing aviation. So the idea is keep those fixed-wing aircraft from becoming part of the battle, and you dramatically shift the correlation of forces. Now again, we are talking about operational strategic warfare as planned by the Russian General Staff, not this silliness we're seeing from the GRU in Ukraine. If you're going to invest in expensive fixed-wing aircraft, you need to also be prepared to invest in expensive infrastructure to support it. There are two solutions, especially for a frontline state. The Gripen aircraft is a perfect aircraft for Ukraine. Actually, it's the only aircraft, and we should be giving it to them now. And my colleague, Greg Melcher, and I have been working very hard with the Swedes to persuade them to do exactly that. And of course, getting off the airfield is the best way to provide fire support to ground forces. And the simplest way to do that is to have the Apache. I think this is an example of what the Dutch have done. The Dutch have invested as heavily in their infrastructure at their main operating bases as they have in terms of the platforms themselves, as well as getting the Apache and the latest version of the Apache so that it can be fully integrated at the front to help the commander control his forces. and the point about artillery, Romanian military history should make this truth absolutely obvious. Both the Russians and the Israelis have come to the same solution as a response to the continuing tactical revolution in military affairs. That is the infantry anti-tank missile. And I was involved in that debate and discussion in Washington since the 1970s, and I think the Israelis and the Russians have come up with a good solution, getting the infantry onto the objective at the same time as the tank. And ever since Marshal Nikolai Olgarkov was appointed chief of the Soviet General Staff on 8 January 1977, the Soviet/Russian solution to the threat posed by the infantry anti-tank missile has been to mechanize artillery. What he did is he made every battery, he went from 6 tubes to 8 tubes, he added a battery to a battalion, and he mechanized it. And boy, would it have been terrible for us to have to confront that had we gone to war in Germany. The problem he had is that you have to move all that ammunition. And so he robbed the Russian economy, or then the Soviet economy, of all the Kamaz vehicles, lined them up in the front area, and by the time he was ready, agricultural production was at the state that less than 50% of Soviet agriculture got from the fields to the consumer. He took down the Russian economy. But you can see the effectiveness. This was a 3-minute fire strike on 2 battalions and 85% casualties. Andy Marshall's second offset proved successful in the Gulf War, where Soviet equipment, planning, and leadership were decisively defeated. Since then, the Apache attack helicopter has gone beyond its original role as a maneuver element to become the tactical commander's secure means of controlling his or her forces. And I've been following the Zapad exercises from 1977 up through today. And the Zapad 21 operational strategic exercise should have put NATO on notice that if the Russians can separate NATO's engaged brigades from their logistics and reinforcements by remotely deployed minefields, which they have demonstrated they can deliver into our depths, NATO logistics and reinforcements can be disrupted by airborne and air mobile forces deployed in NATO's defensive depth. So if the Russian General Staff were able to deliver their plans, our logistics systems, our logistics capability has to be prepared to defend itself against light infantry. With there, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Philip. And I will pass the floor to the next speaker, Mr. Bogdan MînRGINEAN. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, dear panel speakers, you may wonder what a construction company is looking in a security forum, speaking in a panel that deals with strategic infrastructure. Well, taking into consideration the current context, Concelex believes that all need active involvement to prevent what might happen to this country or Europe. All includes also construction companies. I am honored to have the chance to speak in this conference, especially during a period where Europe's infrastructure is under tremendous pressure. You may say construction companies should deal with their projects and leave the military infrastructure for army engineers. Reality, however, is calling for a different approach, dual infrastructure usage. And this concept is not a new one. We are just a little bit late implementing it in Romania. I would like to address this topic today. Now, why new enhanced modern infrastructure? Because warfare has always called for deterrence, and deterrence calls, among others, for military mobility. Can we develop this for civilian and military use? Is Romania ready for such complex, large-scale projects? I think we are. We at Concelex passed already through the delivery of stadiums, airports, energy projects, and now we are ready for new types of projects, for special projects, further strengthening our position as reliable partner. Coming now back to infrastructure and military mobility, where my colleagues are far more familiar with formulating and implementing defense strategies, I can tell you that military mobility is critical for credible deterrence. Unfortunately, narrow roads and bridges not equipped to take heavy loads weaken our mobility at times when Eastern Front relies on fast equipment deployment from West. The coherence of the entire flank, especially in the context of Ukraine war, calls for developments to support the Madrid-approved permanent NATO presence in the eastern flank. Now that's a lot to do. You would ask how to start. We start with extensive infrastructure assessment aimed to prioritize and budget dual-use projects. You know that a huge part of 10th geographic scope is overlapping with infrastructure identified as relevant for the military purpose in that area. It's about 90%. So what are we waiting for? You would say budget is an issue, but it seems to be taken care of. EU installed military mobility fund of 1.7 billion to co-fund dual-use infrastructure projects, while Romania defense budget is growing. EU Recovery and Resilience Fund may also be as additional funding. But it's not only about roads and bridges. With infrastructure becoming more important than operational capabilities, we need to look at alternatives. The Danube is a consistent replacement but needs more harbors and the existing one upgrades. The Romanian rail system is unable to transport heavy equipment. If improved, existing airfields could be used by large transport aircrafts. And all these potential projects add up to the bigger picture, bringing on top of military deterrence further development of manufacturing facilities and logistics services. So this is prosperity. FDI would consider investing in Romania if infrastructure is reliable and provides good coverage. This is one more proof that a whole-of-society approach with dual-use projects as a pillar will bring benefits to all. I sincerely hope that roundtables like this, where both military and private sectors show readiness in building partnerships, urge the Romanian government to understand that now is the time. Let's reveal the elephant in the room. Strategic infrastructure and military mobility are now more than ever linked to national security. So, what to do? We need to start assessing existing infrastructure, developing and implementing dual-use projects. We need to start proper stakeholder management, able to deeply analyze the needs and expectations. Furthermore, we need to streamline public procurement procedures, cutting those lengthy bureaucratic processes, sometimes driven by anomalies. The last point, maybe we need to set as baseline the yellow FIDIC approach, design and build. This gives on one hand the possibility to the employer to easily formulate and draft a set of parameters as sole benchmark for the project. And on the other hand, pushes designer and general contractor to actively implement high-performance materials, state-of-the-art solutions and technologies in order to assure the technical and commercial value engineering of the project. So, 4 simple steps. And one thing, the lowest price is not the right strategy when we are talking about critical infrastructure. I personally don't want to see any bridges collapsing on takeover day. In the end, I want to leave you with Brâncuș words. Simplicity is nothing than solved complexity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, Mr. Mษ์RGINEAN. Very interesting points. We'll come back to them maybe at the end to the round of question and answers. The last but not the least, I will give the floor to Mr. Bogdan Lîn ZİROAE. Sir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I think we're all in ever more strident agreement. And being the last one to make a few remarks, which I took notes, you will hear some of the points that were made reverberated, I think. When we look at NATO and NATO's missions, and obviously Romania is fortunate of being part of it in today's world in particular, the alliance itself actually needs its members to invest in mission-ready capabilities on their territory. With the strategic shift towards the east, call it eastern flank, eastern front, it doesn't matter. We're basically the new border of civilization, similar to the situation we've all encountered during the Cold War. There is a need to actually shift defense capabilities onto the territories in the eastern flank, and in particularly Romania. NATO is currently planning, as General BERDILЫN mentioned, is intensifying its efforts for deterrence and defense against Russia. We will see quite a bit of this coming out in Vilnius. Well, not publicly, but at least at least behind the scenes. But both this deterrence and defense actually needs to take place on the eastern flank, and in particularly in Romania. While the capabilities that exist today are mostly located in Cold War NATO territories, in what was once used to be called Western Europe. So the strategic outlook and the road ahead of us actually creates immense opportunities for Romania when it comes to becoming a regional player in the alliance, both because its unique location, but also because its consistent and constant active role in NATO at the end of the day. The substantive and permanent NATO presence in Romania increases defense capabilities for the country and its security posture, improves security, but also, and we tend to forget this, actually creates economic benefits locally. Provides employment, provides access to technology, increases access to capabilities, promotes economic development and growth. We don't talk a whole lot, but when you look at the history of particularly Belgium and Germany, with the NATO bases that existed during the Cold War, there's an economic history in addition to the defense history taking place there that we tend to forget. Also, partially because of the enlargement of the alliance, when you look at NATO, NATO is actually moving away from having capabilities done at 31, in today's case, where all the members participate, and shifting towards multinational programs. And it actually has a history of delivering multinational programs very successfully. One of the fundamental capabilities of the alliance during the Cold War was a multinational program. In fact, one of the first ones, if I remember correctly, which is the Central European Pipeline System that delivers fuel to forces, but more importantly also during the peace times, delivers jet fuel to 6 large international airports like Frankfurt, Paris, Amsterdam, Brussels, for civilian use. That served a particular purpose during the Cold War. Geographically, that has shifted to where we are today. So when you look at it, similar models, similar investments, similar capabilities, again, assuming the military planning and requirements are there, ought to exist locally and provide not only a defense capability, but they also provide an economic benefit to the country. Similarly, the strategic airlift capability, which is located in Papa in Hungary, it's a multinational program. It's been immensely successful, both from a military and civil emergency preparedness, as well as delivering humanitarian missions around the world. There are areas in the strategic objectives of deterrence and defense of the alliance that I think create plenty of opportunity for Romania to contribute and have a permanent presence. It's extremely, I mean, it's crucial to actually have equipment, but in an oft-repeated maxim, you know, amateurs discuss strategy, professionals discuss logistics. When we look at military mobility, it remains a challenge, particularly on this side, and will forever will be. When we look at sustainment, and particularly for troops that are stationed here, maybe rotationally with or without family, as it may be the case. When we look at preposition of equipment, as well as multi-domain training and operations, we remain challenged on the eastern front, and in particular on the eastern flank, and in particularly in this area of operation regionally and locally. Recognizing that becoming a host nation is an essential security capability for Romania is the first step, actually, in establishing a presence. And it does require, in the case of infrastructure, a whole of society approach, a whole of government approach, because the aspects of it go well beyond the military and the diplomatic aspects. There's substantial local security, intelligence, counterintelligence aspects to it, taxes, status of forces and status of staff agreements that need to take place. So it's a subject that goes well beyond what the Ministry of Defense normally would look like. And our urging, for the lack of a better word, is to look at it as a complete issue rather than just in isolation as being a military problem that needs to be solved. Romania becoming a NATO host nation, in the best definition of it, for specific capabilities, somewhere in the domains that the military requires and the political decisions are being made, has direct benefits for the country, as we mentioned, in terms of defense and security, but also in economic terms. And we ought to consider both when we go forward. At the end of the day, even the investments that are required end up being spent largely locally, in the local economy. And then there's a long trail after that of sustainment. And I will close by giving you one specific example. The U.S. Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 has a section that specifically prohibits the Department of Defense from making any further investments in Baumholder, Germany, which is the largest base, with the exception of the Department of Defense continuing that unless a host nation steps forward to providing some of those capabilities. And there's a list of host nations. Interestingly enough, Romania is number one on that list that actually has 7 countries. So we ought to look at this as being not only a defense capability that would exist in Romania, but also at its economic and political benefits that go well beyond the immediate defense aspect of it. And with that, questions are a lot more interesting, I think, for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much as well. So with that, we concluded the first part of the speeches delivered by speakers, and we go for the second part, the question and answer session. So please address any of them. If you can point someone on the podium who want to address the question. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Okay. So gentlemen, good morning. Thank you. Fascinating conversation. David Carstens from the U.S. Embassy. The one piece that I was hoping would come out here didn't, and so I guess I'm going to direct this at General BERDILÂN a bit, because, sir, you so correctly outlined the fact that one of the big challenges right now are the people that drive the infrastructure, that drive the systems. And it's only going to get worse, by the way. You know this. the more complicated systems that you purchase, the more you train the people, and the more of an asset they become to the public sector or private sector. So cyber is a great example. You create a cyber command, you put all this training into individuals, they leave, and they go work for, pick a cyber company that's there to quickly scoop them up. And we know this in the United States because this happens with us as well. So maybe the answer is not to resist. It's because it's going to happen. It's really to change the culture of how the military works with the private sector. It's embracing the defense contractors that are actually helping to produce some of the tools that contribute to the national military strategy. You know, as a young Army officer in the United States, when I started deploying lots after 9/11, one of the first things I started to think about was, oh my God, can these 3 different contractors that are assigned to my unit, can they deploy into the combat zone with me? They were my combat multipliers. They were the ones that were gonna, you know, make the information flow, that were gonna make the systems work, in addition to my soldiers. But that creates I mean, what you have to do to build that is create that really tight partnership between that military-industrial complex in a country and the Ministry of National Defense. And I sense a bit of resistance to do that. And it is unfortunate. So is really the, you know, and long lead up to a question, should we not really be getting to a culture change here where Romania is embracing their defense contract community to help build a capability which in fact will help sustain the Ministry of National Defense in the long haul?
Well, thank you for the question, and Dave, thank you for addressing that to me. You had to say it, and I'm sure the other panelists will contribute. But that's a good point. The cultural change of the comprehensive apparatus of Romania when it comes to security and defense. I'll take a little bit of a context of how Romania really played most recently since the invasion of Crimea. And Romania and other allies really pointed out that this is becoming too toxic in the region to not to pay attention from a comprehensive approach of a public-private strategy towards coping with security challenges. So in some years and recently, Romania really approached some of the Romanian, or the armed forces approached the Romanian contractors in discussing this reform to what was coming. And to the bad news, last year in February, this became a toxic aggression of Russia against Ukraine. I think inside, as we speak also, the multi-domain operations concept, this is sometimes perceived just a military doctrine of the new concept. No, when I say multi-domain, I really approach inside the country of having companies, having other institutions and agencies participate, not in helping the MOD, but supporting the war effort or the crisis effort, depending on the status of how we perceive that. Parenthesis, that's part of the cultural change. We all need to realize that we sit in some sort of peacetime situation, but in reality, there's a lot of hybrid conflict going on today in the region. So this is not the peacetime we used to know. Close the parenthesis, again, go back to the private public partnership towards security and defense. So we started to evaluate and reassess the capacities for the industrial base. And you can forward presence military capabilities. You need to bring industrial base forward presence. And a third pillar would be, I think, bring forward the narrative. Examples like this conference would converge the azimuths of communication with STRATCOM much better. So again, you need military capabilities to be forward, the industrial base, and the narrative. For the industrial base, I think in capacities, allies in the Black Sea region can find the instruments to adapt to the new culture we all need. But without very heavy companies and heavy, I mean, global capacities that can actually come forward, I think we'd lose the pace. There's I think a delta that has the smell of a vulnerability, a delta of tempo of how we react to, in terms of industrial base, to what the capacities of Russia still has today. So that combination of a global company, a local or regional company, an integration project towards new capabilities, I think brings the pace to an equal approach that we all need for staying relevant with the capabilities that we all forge into the new regional/national plans.
Good day again. My name is Valentin Berca, Bere Kappa Systems Company from Creva. I have two small concrete questions. The first, in 2018, was launched the military mobility concept by 6.5 billion euros. Also in 2018, in Bucharest, at the TRIS Initiative Forum was launched Rail to Sea and Via Carpathia. But last year appeared a new 10T maps, including dual-use corridors, transport corridors to Ukraine, to Moldavia, covering Western Balkans. And also last year was launched Military Mobility 2.0. This year in September, Romania will host 3C Initiative Forum. For Mr. General Lieutenant BERDILă, what could be a new proposal project within contextual time related dual-use transport corridor at September 3 Initiative Forum, and in the same contextual times for Mr. Phil PETERSEN, if US Gov could launch new financial support under European Deterrence Initiative to Romania, not only AMK, Deveselu and Câmpia Turzii Air Base. Thank you.
Again, for the first question, and yes, military mobility in recent years, it used to be a new lexicon, but I think because of the exercises and the evaluations inside NATO, specifically with the Joint Force Command in Naples that has the part of enabling of this EOR and the defense staff, also our Joint Force Command. In recent years, I can tell you in this room, in this format, that yes, we do have solutions. And I want you to think military mobility and military corridors not from a perspective of really strategic continental volume, but inside the AOR, specifically in Romania, there are solutions today to integrate forces when you speak of a very tactical or operational capability that arises in Romania. Another point to that is recent exercises in the last 2 years, and I'll point to Defender Europe, also Sabre Guardian, really exercised the proposals we had, how to move forces into Romania, how to move forces to Romania, and then inside Romania. So there's some solutions, but in concert, we do depend on what at the European level mobility looks like in terms of dual purpose corridors. So in some parts, we're waiting for some of the solutions in the mobility corridors, but we're also developing military corridors. We do have some solutions for that. Set aside that, we also explored corridors that in times of, like I said, peacetime different today. I will point to a corridor that most of us started to understand, the Danube. the Danube River really has a capacity to move and to become a supply chain corridor for most of the resources, not only military. That needs to be tested not inside the military only, but also with companies and also commercial contractors. I think there's room to develop in there and to provide integration with the military forces inside the plans that we try to integrate. Also, how do we, again, I pointed out about the relationship with the partners. How do we extend that to the partners in providing, as the Prime Minister described yesterday, that's a different type of corridor, but energy corridors belong to mobility. So how do we help in attaching or connecting the partners to corridors that are not only physical mobility, but they provide resources for to create enough independency of the partner against the Russian dominance of resources, in this case, gas and energy, and all types of subversive instruments that Russia uses to constrict and to block a partner from developing inside that nation.
Yes, the next question and probably the last one.
Yeah.
I just was going to pick up on a point that General Berdilă had made earlier with regard to the vulnerabilities that we have in NATO, and that is the Russian view of warfare is called New Generation Warfare. It has it has 9 elements. One element deals with nuclear weapons. The other 8 are divided equally between kinetic and non-kinetic means of warfare. And I think that if there's a study here that New Generation Warfare Center has just done and is available here on attitudes toward defense and the war of Romanians. And it was done in conjunction with the Norwegians. And this is completely consistent with the results is completely consistent with what I've seen done in the Czech Republic and Slovakia and amazingly, even Poland. We don't seem to get it. They're beating the pants off us in information warfare. And if we don't wake up, it doesn't matter what you invest in or how many pieces of shiny hardware you buy or how much weapons you stock or ammunition you stockpile, our publics won't support it. And we have this problem in the ACEs in the United States. So I think, you know, the research that New Strategy Center has done is reminding us once again we're missing the point. Russia can still win this war even if they just prolong it on the battlefield until they destroy us from internal social forces.
Thank you.
Please be short. We have
Yes,
3
I will
minutes for question and answer. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not exactly a question. And firstly, I want to thank General Carstens pointing out the relationship that needs to be implemented more thoroughly between public and private sector. I'm Augustin Lupu. I represent Technopro Engineering, a field service support company doing support for land vehicles, indirectly for a Romanian army, subcontracting from global contractor. And this is one of the examples that I could share with anybody. This is what we have learned. I mean, we have experience now based on the relationship with global contractors supporting this, including Afghanistan. We need more support. The Romanian private industry sector needs more support in pushing relation with Minister of Economy, not Minister of Defense, because I know General Berdilă is supporting this. We need more support from the army of gathering together private industry. We are more, I'm pretty sure, but we are not known by the Romanian army, unfortunately. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I will end up with this conclusion, as I concur very much that we, due to the immense increased requirements for both armament and ammunitions. We need to find a solution for this transition to a peacetime defense industry to wartime defense industry, which requires speed and a big volume. So we need to find a smart solution to identify that one of them, it's indeed what you said, a closer cooperation and communications between the private industry and governments and responsible for allowing that. So with that, I think we touch all the points. I want to thank everybody for participation, and please join me in a round of applause. I thank to the speakers, and please join me to a round of applause for all of them. Thank you.